We are on to the subject of the two witnesses, and as we are going to be looking at them, we're going to cover part of thinking about them, and there's a dispute that ever goes on about exactly who the witnesses are. Nonetheless, there's an awful lot of really interesting stuff that can be examined as we go through this. So let's look at this review tonight. And we have, of course, we have seen the things which are, which is the vision of Christ, chapter number 1. Okay, and the things which are, which is the 7 churches of the Revelation, chapters 2 and 3. And I found a way to help try to remember a little bit extra about them, because you'll remember the first church. Oh no, what's our acronym? ESP and TSP. Just, you can always remember that, because when I ask that question, you do not need any ESP to know what I'm thinking. Okay, ESP and TSP. Let's see if we can do the ESP, TSP, just to name the churches. Okay, so you have, say it all together: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And the reason that you don't need to have ESP, TSP, L is because everybody remembers Laodicea. And for that matter, you don't have to know which is the P's, because Philadelphia, you know, that's also at the end too. Okay, so you have ESP, TSP, and and Laodicea. Okay, so Ephesus lost their first love. Smyrna is the what church? Suffering church. What were the gifts that the wise men brought to Jesus at his birth? Frankincense and myrrh. So you got Smyrna, and that's directly related. It's associated with the suffering. It's the incense of his suffering. So you can remember that. You should be able to remember that one, that it's a suffering church. Okay. Now, the next one is Pergamos. And I went back to refresh myself to make sure of everything. Does everybody know what bigamy is? Okay, how about polygamy? Okay, you want to know what pergamy is? Pergamy is? It's marriage. Okay, and this is where the seed of Satan was married to the church, where to Christianity, to the church culture of that time. And then we have Thyatira, which you are going to recognize as the tolerant church. That's where the mystery religions, the doctrines of that, were accommodated. Thyatira means sacrifice. Okay, it's got a little bit more than that, but sacrifice is a key idea behind that. And if you think of the sacrifice of the Mass and the accompanying doctrines regarding that, then you might be able to remember Thyatira. Probably one of the hardest ones, I think, to remember what it's all about. But that would be the key there. And that, of course, was during the Dark Ages. Then came the Church of Sardis, the dead church, and they are dead because of the lack of evangelistic activity. And then comes Philadelphia. Yay, Philadelphia, the revival church. And then the sadness of Laodicea and the lukewarm church. Now, if you'd like to ever go to see this review again, it appears now, it's appearing on the last 3 videos that we did, and as long as we keep doing the review to keep us going, you'll be able to see that if you go and check that out at pbchurch.com/cell. If you are using your cell phone, all you have to do is say pbchurch.com. It automatically goes to the correct site. Okay, and then are you ready for it? Here it comes. Here it comes. Look, there we go. We're out of there. Okay. Okay, which brings us to the things which shall be hereafter, which starts off in the throne room with the rapture and the scene at the throne room, and that is right at the beginning, chapters 4 and 5, the rapture and the throne room, followed up with the 7 seals. Okay, you know that there's this book that's got to be opened up. The seals are being broken, and something is burgeoning out. It's trying to get us, it's the trumpets, right? Okay, now during that time, you get the first interlude. Now some of these things, seals, trumpets, vials, probably should be able to remember. The interludes, if you're a really good Bible student, you'll have at least an understanding of the interludes. The interludes, remember, are descriptive of the characters and actors in the Revelation. Okay, they are not chronological, they're semi-chronological. Okay, so you have the first interlude appears in the middle of it, before the last seal, just like the second interlude comes before the last trumpet. Okay, so the great multitude and 144,000 appear in there. Brings us to the middle, the seven trumpets. Remember that the seven trumpets, they're around the middle time. It's not that it's just like a line of demarcation. It's not that they're at the middle time there. Okay, so you have the second interlude, and that's where we are today, is at the second interlude with the two trumpets. The second interlude starts in chapter 10, and we're moving on to chapter 11. The first half of the chapter deals with the two witnesses. That's where we're at today. So let's go over to that. This is section 5 here in our area. What's the general area? The general area is the second interlude. We're up to this point number 5 in the discussion here, starting with the understanding of the two witnesses. So the first 14 chapters of 11 continue the interlude between the 6th and 7th trumpets. Okay, just as the first interlude came just before the 7th seal, the second interlude comes before the 7th trumpet. Okay, and the 7th trumpet, just like the 7th seal started the 7 trumpets, the 7th trumpet is going to start the 7 vials, and that's coming up. And it's going to ultimately conclude with the Battle of Armageddon and the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. John Walvoord reminds us, he was one of the great teachers at Dallas Theological Seminary before they started to dip down. But he reminds us of the importance of interpreting these somewhat difficult passages of Scripture literally. He says, the best guideline to follow in interpreting this section is to take each fact literally. In line with this principle, a literal temple will be in existence during the Great Tribulation. And the city should be considered the literal city Jerusalem, in keeping with its identification in 11 verse 8. The time periods of 42 months, which is coming up, it's going to be made reference to. And the 3.5 days, again, should be considered literally, the 3.5 days that they're going to be lying in the street. The earthquake will literally kill 7,000 individuals, and the two witnesses should be considered as two individual men. This reminds me how this week I got a nice email, and I sort of look at things when I see some Revelation things that are available to study. And this one author, he did a very extensive outline preaching the book of the Revelation, and he was offering the book for free. I just don't think I'm going to get it, because he explains, why the premillennial view is wrong, and how the book of the Revelation is supposed to be interpreted, allegorically. And I thought, no, thank you. We'll just pass on that. No, it's very literal. That's why it's free, right? Yeah. Okay. I hope he did not do a good job writing it, because you don't want someone to get caught up just because he's got good style. Okay, it's also to remember that what is being described here is not necessarily chronological, as I said before. Subsequent to the opening of the 6 trumpets, for instance, the ministry of the two witnesses discussed in this chapter, their ministry is during the first half of the tribulation. And the Gentile dominion described in verse 2 is referring to the second half of the 7-year period. So again, it's not chronological, although it is in order. This passage not only represents an interlude, but also a parenthetical narrative of events that possibly coincide with other events dealt with in the Revelation. So question 208, the primary emphasis of this interlude is the character of the ministry of the witnesses with respect to the events that occur in the chronological record of the Revelation. Okay, so point number 6 here refers to the measurement of the temple. Revelation 11, 1 and 2 says, there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. Okay, so now this is where we might expect again some of the difficulties when you're looking at the Revelation with things being sort of vague. No, you got some really good information that you can understand from this, some good background. The temple will be rebuilt during the tribulation period. It will be used by the Jews for worship in the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, as per the covenant that the Antichrist is going to make with Israel, that he's going to break 3.5 years into the tribulation. So this will be because of that treaty. So question 209, the temple will be used during the first half of the tribulation. Phillips comments that evidently the Jews have by now regained possession not only of the temple site, but of the right to do something with it. The Mosque of Omar has been reduced to rubble, and a glorious new temple to Jehovah has been built in its place. And this is really kind of some exciting stuff for us that we can see. You know, when we talk about a number of times with Revelation, we see things that are happening today that can be interpreted as part of getting ready for the tribulation and the rapture. Here are some things that are distinctly concrete for us to look at that really help us see that yeah, we could be very easily going into the tribulation not too long from now. I shouldn't say we should be going into the rapture, and the rest of the world going into the tribulation not too long from now. The Mosque of Omar is a mosque that was built on the Temple Mount. It was built there deliberately. Number one, because the Muslims, they like to build these mosques and other things as a sign of taking ownership of an area. This was one of the complaints when they were looking at building a mosque, a Muslim learning center over at the 9/11 site, was because this was interpreted as, if you understand Muslim thinking, this was a way of saying, haha, we claimed this, we did this. And so it didn't go over very well. So the Mosque of Omar was built there in order to shut out the Jews from being able to reestablish themselves in the land. Brother Joe, could you Google something real quick and see when the Mosque of Omar was built? Yes, OMAR. Okay. It occurs to me that would be an interesting point to make sure to include here. Okay, so it's possible the temple could be built prior to the rapture of the church. It's possible. And then, and it's also possible that it would be the start of the tribulation when they go to rebuild it. But more likely it will be built at the beginning of the period due to the negotiations of the Antichrist. But we see preparations being made now for this. This is one of the reasons why having President Trump in place, this is not a political statement at all, but there has been talk about Jerusalem being the recognized capital of Israel, which the Muslims have taken great umbrage to, and they did not want that. So even though a long time ago, a number of presidents ago, they established that Jerusalem would be the capital of Israel, but they continually failed to actually put the capital in Jerusalem.
You mean Dome of the Rock?
Dome of the Rock, yeah. Okay, so what happens is one of the things that Trump did was, in his typical no nonsense, we say we're going to do it, we do it kind of action, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which angered a lot of people because it says, "Oh, well, you're disrespecting us here as Muslims by doing this, and this is a threat to us, and we take offense at this." Yeah, this is something that's been talked about, and every step that's taken of action really moves in that direction. Do you have when they built that, Brother Joe?
Now, the Dome of the Rock and the Mosque of Omar are not the same.
Okay, no, I thought they were. Okay, let's say the Dome of the Rock, because that's more
Dome of the Rock,
important to
okay,
me then.
Okay,
The initial construction was undertaken in 691 and 692. But the original dome collapsed in 1015 and was rebuilt in 1022 and 1023.
Okay,
And according to this entry, the Dome of the Rock is the world's oldest surviving work of Islamic architecture.
okay. Is that date coinciding with Crusades by any chance?
well, this,
The original dates of 691 and 692 would predate the
Right,
Crusades.
yeah.
1015 and 1022 probably could be. I'll look into that.
Yeah, do that. Check the dates, because I'm trying to remember. My recollection is that it was associated with a statement being made to say we won in the Crusades, something similar to that. Okay, so he makes note here: the effort and plans for a new temple have been very active since 1948. There have been no signs of it dying out since that time, 1948, because that's when Israel was recognized as sovereign in that area. In 1986, the Temple Institute created priestly garments. In 1989, advances were made to create a Talmudic school and identify family lines of Jewish priests to conduct sacrifices. In 1998, a holy half shekel began being collected for the temple's operation. In 2011, the Temple Institute completed blueprints for the temple. In 2016, a school was created to train Levites for service in the temple. The Antichrist will be a false peace to the world, which will even include a peace between Israel and her neighbors. And as I mentioned before, President Trump had moved the embassy there, and there are distinct moves to be able to do that. There's been talk of trying to breed a red heifer in order to be able to do certain kinds of sacrifices. And Jimmy DeYoung says they've already done that, and that doesn't surprise me at all. So question 210, see, this is what I find exciting about this. The temple is a very specific thing that is very concrete to us to understand what the Antichrist will be doing, because as we're going to see here in a moment, he's going to present himself in the holy place as the abomination of desolation. We'll see that in these scriptures that are coming up shortly. Okay, so it's so question 210, the temple could be rebuilt either prior to the tribulation or because of the peace negotiations of the Antichrist. Okay, at the conclusion of the first half of the tribulation period, at the middle point, the Antichrist will break his covenant with Israel and will desecrate the temple and demand that the Jews worship him. Well, again, these are actions that are real easy to understand. We can really visualize these. According to Daniel 9:27, he says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate." And that means that they're going to be having the sacrifices. He's going to stop it in the middle. He's going to break this covenant that he has with them and to get the worship for himself. And these abominations are going to be widespread. We're talking about worldwide worship of the Antichrist, the one world government, the one world economic system. And it says even until the consummation of the 7 years, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 and 4 says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God." That's the role the Antichrist is going to take on in the middle of the tribulation, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And then this is backed up with Matthew 24:15. He says, when Jesus on the Mount of Olives, the Olivet Discourse, says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. And then he goes on with instructions after that. And so this abomination of desolation, it could be the image of the beast, it could be a number of things, but at any rate, it is going to be there in the middle of the temple and being set up for worship. Okay. Brother Joe, yes.
Okay. Let me qualify that this is from Wikipedia. Okay. There's no real consensus on the motivation to building the Dome of the Rock. Some historians would say that it was built, as you said, to
Lay claim.
to be a religious monument of victory over the Christians that would distinguish Islam's uniqueness with the common Abrahamic religious settings of Jerusalem. Another historian has argued that it was built just to compete with the many fine buildings of worship of other religions. And then the last one's a little bit more complicated, but apparently there was some infighting within different, I don't know what you would say, different realms of Islam, and that it may have been built to divert people from going to Mecca and actually going there for pilgrimage. So there's a a variety of motive theories that are held.
I think it's rather convenient that it was done at the end of the Crusades there, as the timing is peculiar. Oops. Let me go backspace. Okay. Okay, question 211 then. The 42 months, the 3.5 years referred to in verse 2, refers to the latter half of the tribulation period after Antichrist breaks his covenant with Israel. Verse 2, let me remind us, says, but the court which is without the temple leave out, measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. So at the time, marking from the time of the abomination of desolation, you have 42 months. That is 3.5 years. What do you know? Okay, 3.5 years. So the latter half of the tribulation period after Antichrist breaks his covenant with Israel. And we have the scriptures, Daniel 7:25. I'm just going to let you keep writing there. I'm just going to read these scriptures rather than put them on the screen. Daniel 7:25 says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. Okay, and that is, a time is 1 year, times is 2 years, and the dividing of time is 1/2 year. And that's all very consistent with the 42 months. Luke 21, verse 24 says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So John was given a reed like a rod, which would be used for the purpose of measurement. The fact that John was told to measure could have something to do with the fact that the temple will be built early in this period, possibly. Measurement also indicates ownership. And whenever God is measuring something, he is declaring his rights as owner. John was given instruction by the angel to measure the temple and the altar. The altar referred to here is not the ark with its mercy seat, with the Holy of Holies, and is probably not the altar of incense either, as that also was a place that only the priests could approach. It probably referred to the brazen altar in the outer court where the sacrifices were burnt. It's important to make the distinction between this earthly altar and the heavenly golden altar previously discussed in the Revelation. John was restricted from measuring the court of the Gentiles. Okay, the court which is without the temple, that would be the court of the Gentiles. And this is where you get a few interesting notes for us right now. In the first century, the temple had a court for the Gentiles, which was the closest place that they could approach to worship God. So if you had Gentiles that were converts, they could not go into the inner court that was reserved for the Jews. They had an outer court. And that outer court, as we're going to see in just a little while, that outer court is mentioned in the book of Ephesians. It was separated by a knee wall. It's a short little wall with plaques on it that no Gentile could pass there without suffering death as a result. And that is the wall of partition that is between the Jew and Gentile that Paul is talking about. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so Herod's temple, there were 3 temples, by the way, that are of concern to us. The first temple was built by Solomon. Okay, the second temple was the rebuilding done by Nehemiah, right, during the time of later after Nebuchadnezzar, actually. Okay, built by Nehemiah, and then it was enlarged and enhanced by Herod. It was not when Herod created the temple, he was only enlarging and refurbishing the temple of Nehemiah. The third temple will be this temple during the time of the tribulation. They contain separate courts, separated from one another, and each designed for a different purpose. The court of the Gentiles, the court of the women, the court of Israel, or the court of men, and the court of priests. The court of the Gentiles is referred to as the outer court. That's the outer court. The court of the Gentiles was the outermost courtyard and the only area of the temple where non-Jews were allowed. As its name implies, the court of the Gentiles was accessible to Gentiles, foreigners, and those who were considered impure. There, worshipers could mill about, exchange money, and even buy animals for sacrifices. It was from the court of the Gentiles that Jesus on 2 occasions drove out the money changers, declaring, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers," Matthew 21:13. The court of the women, the only area of the temple complex in which women could worship, contained the poor boxes. One of these boxes was where the poor widow offered her 2 mites. Ceremonially clean Jewish men could enter the court of Israel, and the court of priests, where the altar stood, was accessible only to Levitical priests. Non-Jews were allowed to enter the court of the Gentiles, but they were forbidden to go any further than the outer court. The inner temple courtyards were enclosed by a balustrade, and at the entrances to it, notices were posted in both Greek and Latin, warning foreigners and uncircumcised persons that crossing into one of the other courtyards was punishable by death. One of those ancient notices is now on display in a museum in Istanbul. Now, if you remember, when Paul in Acts chapter 21 was about to have his imprisonment in Rome, the charge against him was that he was supposed to have brought a Gentile into the inner courts there, and that's why he was that's what they were initially trying to arrest him for. He was innocent of the charge, but the mob beat him with the intent to kill him. It was only because of a quick action of a Roman garrison commander that preserved Paul's life this time. Now, Christ abolished the distinction between Jews and Gentiles within the church. In Galatians 3:27, we read, and this is the bottom scripture here, it says, "For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." And then Ephesians 2:11 and 16, Paul writes, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off, are made nigh by the blood of Christ." Okay, they were strangers, they were far off, now they're made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace. And I always like to point out the word peace means to join together. Who hath made both one and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby. And this is the important point. We have the church today, okay, and we do not have for this dispensation, for this time period, the work of God being done through the Jews. It is being done through the Jews and Gentiles together, and they have been brought into one. When people think about the great world religions, they talk about the Abrahamic Accords that were created not too long ago between all the great faiths that have come down from Abraham, and they say Islam and Judaism and Christianity. Well, no, Islam did not come down from Abraham. Okay, it did not. And if anything, Christianity is not really different than Judaism. In fact, it's not different at all. Okay? But the Judaism of today is not the Judaism that we're talking about. Okay, this is nothing more. Christianity is nothing more than true Judaism. It is what Judaism was to turn into. It was the next step in, pardon my French, evolution for Judaism. One of my contentions is if I'm talking to somebody who's Jewish, is I want them to become more Jewish. There's a misconception out there that Christians are trying to destroy Judaism by turning everybody into Christians. No, it's not destroying Judaism. It's fulfilling Judaism. If anything, we are children of Abraham. Okay, we've been grafted in to be children of Abraham, but we're all one together as one body. And that's what Paul is emphasizing here in the book of Ephesians, the first 3 chapters of Ephesians. That's the big argument that Paul is making. I'm sorry?
We're the wild ones.
We're the wild ones, yeah. Okay. So so this is true to Judaism, and I try to get somebody who's Jewish to be more Jewish. Okay, more Jewish than they are. Take your Jewish Messiah. And in fact, this concept, this is one of the great issues at the beginning that the early church, one of the first theological issues that they had to deal with was that bond between the two, between Judaism and Christianity. Peter faced it, Paul faced it, the book of Galatians deals with it, the book of Ephesians deals with it, it's dealt with in the book of Acts, the book of Romans deals with that whole issue. It was one of your first theological issues to have to contend with. Okay, so so that balustrade, that knee wall has been destroyed. There is no outer court and inner court. There will be during the tribulation. Okay, in the tribulation period, the rapture has already taken place, and the Gentile Christians are now in heaven. The vast majority of the remaining Gentiles belong to Antichrist and are here rejected by God. The Gentiles, led by Antichrist, will begin a campaign against the holy city, much like the campaigns taken in the past by the Babylonians, also by the Romans, but God is going to protect his people. So question 212, the land of Israel and the Gentile outer court will continue to be dominated by the Gentiles throughout the rest of the tribulation. So we will notice that God is also measuring, perhaps counting the worshipers in the temple, which indicates his ownership over them as well. Robert's comments about these worshipers. Those worshipers in John's vision represent a future godly remnant in Israel who will worship God in the rebuilt temple. Among them are probably those who will come to Christ through the ministry of the 2 witnesses. Ezekiel also saw a vision of men measuring the temple, and Zechariah saw a man measuring Jerusalem, and the New Jerusalem was also measured with a golden reed later on in the book of the Revelation. Okay, and we had hoped to get to question 213. We will not. Okay, we're going to hold off here. We're going to look at the ministry of the 2 witnesses. Sunday afternoon. So we'll save that for the to go with the next section there. Okay, so I think again, I think you can see why this is kind of exciting because of the understanding we can get. You've got distinct stuff, understanding about the temple and what Satan's going to be doing, and this becomes a nice key figure in this time.